Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. McCoy. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursday. And I'm coming on just a minute or so earlier so that I can give people time to join me on this evening. I'm so glad that you're here. If you're joining after Thursday, then guess what? I'm glad you're here too. This is the first day of August 2024, and I wanted to share with you just some, information. This will be the talk on this evening, or maybe not the talk, just information, just me sharing with you about my study abroad in Italy. So on this evening, I have on my shirt. This is one of the shirts that I bought while I was there. And as you can see, let me see if I can sit up just a little bit. Italia. So Italy, here, this shirt has their Rome, Florence, Naples, and Venice. Okay, so of course it's in Italian. And then there you see the flag there for Italy and the colors. I actually stayed in Rome. That's where the hotel was. But I was able to study in Rome, Florence, and Naples. So I just wanted to share some of my experience with you, just as I did when I was preaching and teaching in South Africa about 2 years ago. Some people want to travel internationally and they haven't yet. And so I want to be sure to be a person who encourages that. And then some people have traveled internationally, so maybe we can exchange some information. But I just want you to know that as a lifetime learner and really as a lifetime student and as a proclaimer of God's word, as a professor at a seminary thinking about practical ministry, I'm really committed to growing. And so I want to grow in my understanding of theology, cultural realities, and biblical truths. And so my traveling abroad, studying abroad last week in Italy helped me to do that. Now, I learned so much that there's no way I can sit here and tell you everything. So I'm grateful that you support my ministry because I'll be able to share with you in various spaces. So as we continue our Bible studies, as I preach, in various locations and teach, I will share as much as I can. But it was a great week. It started July 21st and ended July 28th. And I want to thank you because I pre-recorded last week's gathering when I focused on BIPOC. I focus on Black, Indigenous, People of Color, Mental Health Awareness Month, which was July. So thank you for watching that. I hope it was helpful. So again, I studied in Rome, I studied in Florence, and I studied in Naples, Italy. I believe that people who study abroad really get to experience an array of adventures beyond really just being a bookworm. So a lot of my study was about, I guess what people would say, bookworm type things, but it was beyond that. Like, for example, I can tell you, and I'm going to share with you about maybe 5 or 6 things. But when thinking about studying abroad, if you've done that, it's so much to learn, and it's not just about a book. Like, for example, I am a pro now in crossing the street. I know that may sound so simple, but I am a pro in crossing the street. Italian drivers gave me a healthy respect for moving vehicles. Scooters, they would zoom around you. Buses and Uber drivers were everywhere, right? And so in the USA, I don't know about you, but I have an understanding that pedestrians have the right of way. Well, in Italy, you have to keep a constant rate of speed while crossing so that you can make it to your hotel alive. Let me tell you what I mean. So like, where I stayed, the hotel was across the street from a small grocery store. It was so awesome. But you needed to really go up to the light so that you won't jaywalk, right? Well, I have to tell you, a couple of times I got across that street and I became a pro at crossing the street. There were buses everywhere. And in order to get to that grocery store, that little grocery store, I was just going. So I have also, number 2, really an appreciation for sidewalks. Now, I don't do a lot of walking in cities. For the most part, I drive, but I'm grateful for a sidewalk. for a smooth paved sidewalk after walking the streets of Italy. In the USA, and that's all. I'm just comparing it to the USA. I'm not comparing it to my travel to South Africa. I'm just comparing it like to the USA. So foot travel, for example, in the USA, the way I understand it is a breeze when you aren't dodging approaching traffic. Doesn't mean that we don't dodge traffic here, but it was a little bit different because there were cobblestone roads. So there were cracks everywhere. So some of the roads would have made us think, oh my goodness, how, like if I would have had on heels, those cobblestone cracks in the road, oh my goodness. And not to mention that it can be dangerously slippery walking on marble floors of Italy. The marble floors of Italy, just beautiful. But I was thinking to myself, whoo, if I had on heels, my goodness. So it was different. So it was different. So I'm just sharing with you. If you're just joining, thank you for being here and welcoming me back. If you're just joining, I'm just telling you the things that I learned, things that you may already know, because some of you have traveled places that I can only dream of. But because you're with me, I just want to share with you. Like the third thing I wanted to share is, again, it's not just about a book type learning, but it's studying abroad. What are you studying? So I studied, for example, the fashion. I feel like I'm slightly more fashionable. After studying in Italy, I appreciate the simple, elegant fashion that Italians have, like linen, really 2 L's, linen and leather. I can tell you that because I studied abroad in Italy. I know that the best deals on leather goods are found at the open air markets. They have these open air markets in Florence, Italy. It was so beautiful. So got on a train, left my hotel in Rome, got on a train and just wanted to see Florence. And I saw this beautiful cathedral. If you looked at my pictures, a lot of what I'm telling you is going to come together, okay? If you're saying, well, what was that? I could not provide a caption for each picture because, as you know, if you looked, I posted like 6 different posts. So I hope that you were able to see the various posts so that it aligns with what I'm telling you. One of those posts, I only post Florence. I post Florence, Italy. One post, I only provided you with a view of Naples, Italy. And then there's another post of just like Rome. There's another post of the Vatican. There's another post of, there's just a lot. So as I'm telling you this, maybe you can put the pieces together, considering that I didn't add a lot of captions. But I'm telling you that in the open air markets in Florence, Italy, you could just walk down and smell the leather. And let me tell you this, what I learned. There was a gentleman there who said to me, whenever you're thinking about buying leather, he said, if it zips on the left side, it truly is Italian leather. If it zips on the right side, and you have to see the coat that I purchased, I bought it so that I could teach. If you ever see me in it, it's this leather lambskin coat, right? And he said that if it zips on the left, it's Italian. If it zips on the right, it's from China. Then, that's not all I learned about leather. You may not even care about leather, but I also learned that he placed, what he did was to show me, the value. I'm talking about now being slightly more fashionable and more not as ignorant about something as simple as leather. I learned when he took one of those coats there and he had a lighter and he placed the lighter on the leather coat and it did not burn. He said, now if this was synthetic or if it was whatever, it would burn. And he placed, and maybe you've seen this, some of these things you may already know. And you may be thinking, Dr. McCoy, it took you to go all the way to Italy to learn that. But I just want to share with you just some details, okay? It was beyond, again, what I could just like learn in a book, read in a book, and not just about theology and things like that. God showed me what culture looks like in this particular space, and I appreciate that. I don't have any friends who are Italian. So it was just awesome. So the coat did not burn. I was like, okay, let me take that with me. Now, I didn't bring the coat to burn it for you, or well, it didn't burn anyway, but I'm not doing that. But if you don't know, That's a way to tell, what Italian leather is, when where it zips and all those types of things. So the other thing I wanted to share with you, number 4, is like the rich culture and food. I know you saw some of the pictures, right? Those tomatoes were the reddest tomatoes I have ever seen. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some beautiful tomatoes in the USA. I'm simply saying, and I don't know if I posted that picture. Oh, I think I did. I posted one picture. I'm trying to think of the food that was. And you can get it in America. Bruschetta, is that the name of it? Well, anyway, it's like toast, like bread, and then there's like tomato on it. You can get it here. I've seen it here. But the way it tasted there, I mean, whenever you're with a set of new people, you just learn a few new things. So Italy is a land of cultural heritage. So that food, I would never forget it in Italy. It's the birthplace, as we know, many of us know, of pizza and pasta. But it has a lot more to offer other than those two dishes, like risotto and lasagna. Look, I'm saying, like, it's like ciao, ciao, ciao bella, lasagna. And it was just so awesome. And I had lasagna there. And I can tell you, I make lasagna. I make homemade lasagna. And my lasagna is really, really good. And I have to admit, now, I'm not just saying this because I make it, but I like my lasagna better. But I only got lasagna in one place. So I cannot say that my lasagna is better than all of Italy. I'm not saying that. But I had like the original lasagna, and it was different. I don't know if I posted a picture of it, but the food, that's all I'm saying. And I loved the Italian pizza. It was like cheesy, and it was like thin crust, and the fresh tomatoes and basil. I've had pizza, and that's one of my favorite things to eat. But I don't know if I really had pizza until I had it there. And I went to a particular place. I may have posted it, but what's the name of it? Washington something. But when I went in there, they actually had on the wall that it was voted like one of the top places to eat, like by travelers, somebody. I'm trying to think of it. But anyway, when you travel, you can rate the hotels and the restaurants, no matter where you are. And that was rated at the top. So many travelers have eaten at that place. And so the pizza, it was called carbonara or something like that. And it was so, so good. I actually got 2 while I was there. I did. And I did so much walking that pizza is gone already. But it was so good. And not to mention gelato. So people told me about the gelato because, plenty of folks have been to Italy. But again, I was studying in Italy. I was not on vacation. It's very different. I have a vacation coming this year, but I was studying. And so when they said to me, make sure you get gelato, I can tell you that I go to a grocery store called Food Lion, and they have, it's something that starts with a T, and it's gelato. And I buy that all the time. So I was like, I eat gelato all the time. So again, because I'm a learner, I am a forever student. I was like, okay, but get the gelato there so that you can compare it to that gelato that you buy like at Food Lion. And I have to admit, the gelato there, it was really, really good. I mean, it was bright and cool tasting, and as I was strolling down those cobblestone streets that I mentioned to you in that hot Italian sun, that gelato was refreshing. And the flavor was just so intense. And I love chocolate, so it was really intense. So it was good. It was good. So then I can tell you, moving on from the food, let's see, getting hold to a new language. Now, I had a book. I had a Learn Italian like book, right? Because I really wanted to, respect where I was. I respect culture because I know that my own culture as an African in America is not always respected. It's not always respected by many people, regardless of what their heritage is. And so I realize that my culture is not embraced by a lot of people, no matter where they come from. So I don't ever want to make anyone feel the way that I feel. If I wear Afrocentric things and it's like, why does she have that on? No matter who's saying it. Or if my hair is the way that that God chose to, let it grow out of my head. And so I decided that that's okay. Everybody doesn't embrace that. Why does it, all of these negative things that are really inflicted on Black bodies. I know what that feels like. And so I wanted to be sure that when I went there, I respected the culture. So I tried to learn, the language a little bit. And it's easier for me to learn a new language in the country if I'm there, like in that country. So I loved being around Italians, and they would speak their language, right? And I thought that was so beautiful. And so, it's like you're a part of the Italian culture when you're there in the environment, and so you're adapting to their language, and it's I don't know, it's just more convenient. And so it was really awesome. And just a reminder to Americans who say to people whose first language is not English, or talk badly about them, you go to a country where English, where you only speak English, and the people there, majority, speak whatever the language is for that particular country, and you see how you feel. Maybe you'll humble yourself when everyone around you is not speaking your English. But I can tell you that the most beautiful thing that we can do everywhere, and I know you know this, but just remember that a smile is universal. And that worked over there. that really did work over there. So thank God for a smile. Thank God for a smile. So the last thing that I really wanted to share with you is, of course, as I studied abroad, I studied biblical and theological competencies, or I focused on that, I should say, for myself. So I serve a number of people in various spaces. And so I don't have the benefit of catering myself for one thing. Some people do. Like, for example, when I worked at the grocery store, I worked in the seafood department, but I couldn't just only go to work and be in the seafood department. I had to diversify myself. Some people, though, only worked in the seafood department. God has given me too many gifts to only work one department. So it's okay for people who are like that. But I've been given, a lot has been given to me, so a lot is required. So even at that grocery store, I worked in seafood, but then I worked in the meat department, which is two different departments. I worked as a cashier. I worked in produce. I worked in frozen. I just worked across the board because I could. So because I know that I have various gifts and talents, I'm not a person who can just do one thing and focus on one thing. So I'm saying all that to say that I had to focus, as I was studying in Italy, on biblical and theological competency, because I serve in the local church. I serve in a seminary. I'm doing this global ministry situation where when I meet people, I don't just stick to my agenda, but I serve the agenda of the people. So that goes beyond denominations, that goes beyond cultural, limitations, and that goes beyond just what I think and what I believe. I have a call to serve people. And so while I was there, I had to think about all these different groups of people. Like how, what you learn, how is that going to translate into helping people in churches? How is that going to translate into helping people in the streets? How is that going to translate into helping people in seminary education? How is that going to translate into helping people dealing with domestic abuse and violence? How is that going to help people who need healing? How is that going to help people in various generations? So I have that call on my life. So I could not go and study in Italy and say, I'm going to do this for the church. I mean, that would be so cool if I could only work at the church, only do church stuff. I couldn't go over there and say, well, I'm going to see how, when I study abroad in Italy, how it's going to help the seminary. That would be so cool if I could just do seminary. You know, that's awesome if I could just do one. I couldn't go over there and say, well, how is this going to help the community? That would be so awesome if I could just do that. You see me doing a lot of things, and I don't post everything, but I do so many things because I get to. I was going to say because I have to. I'm not going to say it like that. I get to. So because I serve various communities, I had to be I had to really be studious because some of the information I gained is not going to be for the church. Some of the information I gained is not going to be for the seminary. I'm going to have to be sure that I apply the appropriate measures to the various contexts and people that I serve. So let me give you some examples of what I mean. So I shared with you how I studied and learned about food. I shared with you how I studied and learned about fashion. That stuff is going to matter to somebody. I studied the language, the culture. Okay, now let's get to some of these biblical things, right? Because I am a preacher too, you know, and I serve in a local church, for example. So, and I serve at a seminary. So in my travel, and I can't begin to tell you everything. Like I said, I thank you for following because I'm going to be talking about this for a long time. And if you have questions about any of the things I've posted, then just let me know. And I have some videos and things coming. But for example, I traveled to the Colosseum. That's in Rome, Italy, right? Traveled there. And I've watched these movies, and you probably have too, like Gladiator, right? And you've seen certain scenes. And so I was able, because remember now, I'm ignorant. And ignorant is not a bad word. It just means that you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know. So I'm really ignorant to the reality of that happening, like in the Colosseum, like all of the happenings in the Colosseum. I've only seen it like in movies. And Hollywood can really what can they do? They can make some things, they can over exaggerate some things. It's art. So art does not necessarily have the kind of rules, you know, that are supposed to stick to truth or to history. So when I was at the Colosseum, we had a great tour guide by the name of Anna. I think I posted a picture of her. But she was so knowledgeable. And she made my view of the Colosseum in like a movie like The Gladiator, like some of that stuff, I was like, okay, I can kind of hold on to it. But she made it clear that, for example, when some of the folks decided to fight in that way, you know, they had those animals there like you see in the movies, like they really had animals, you know, to go in, and these men would fight the animals, but then they would also fight each other, right? But she said that sometimes in that Colosseum, and I hope you really looked at those pictures, they were amazing. But she said that they choose to fight. Sometimes there are people who are slaves. There were people who were slaves. But sometimes there were people who chose to fight. And they chose to fight because there was prestige attached to winning those battles. And also funding would happen. And you would just get that benefit of being the hero. Can you imagine that? So they would push their bodies to the extent of possible death in order to walk in the community and say, yeah, that's me. And I was thinking, that's really wild. But then I connected that to 2024. There are those of us who are so hungry for power and for attention and for prestige. You know, I want your likes. I want your follows. I want to be above everybody else that's doing what I'm doing. I want to be the best, even if it kills me. Why? Because I focus more on my strength and my power than anything else. We're not too different. So I was thinking about that. So that's what I mean about connecting. You may not care about that, but somebody's going to. So that's some of the information. I have a lot to say about the Colosseum, but I need to move on. Let me give you another example. I studied there in Rome. The Vatican, we went to the Vatican. So I traveled to the Vatican. So you may know about the Vatican, right? You may have even been there. If you've been there, did you go into the Sistine Chapel? Amazing. So many of us know about Michelangelo. We know that he painted, you know, for example, that he painted on the ceiling, right? to stand there and look at that is amazing. It's like you stand there and you just look, and they won't let you take pictures in there. So that's why you didn't see me with, sending or putting a picture, there on Facebook about that. But you saw pictures, and they were pictures in the Vatican of all these sculptures and everything. Oh, I have so much to tell you. It's going to come out later, but just for the sake of time, the Sistine Chapel. So Michelangelo, she taught me, the tour guide, she taught me that there are those who say, well, Michelangelo was such a great artist that, wow, he wanted to do that. I mean, he wanted to, well, the story is, let me give you the inside scoop if you don't already know. What I learned is the Pope beckoned him to paint, and you don't say no to the Pope. So he was in his 30s. He starts to paint, right? She said that he's like 30 some odd years old, 33. Let's say he's 33, 30. He's in his early 30s. It takes him 4 years to complete the task. Well, when he begins, he's still a young man. 30 is young, right? 30 something. He's still a young man. But the 4 years later, he's still a young man, right? But she said that his body had changed so much because as he's painting, all of these chemicals are in his eyes. So she says his eyes, they're not like they used to be. His body is almost like disabled now, right? Because he's doing this. Now, keep in mind, as he's doing this, I was in there looking up at this beautiful scene for about 10 minutes, and my neck was starting to hurt. Made me think of how wimpy a 2024 person can be. And I told you before how people will put things out there on Facebook complaining about this, this, and this. You walk those streets and you know those stories. He's painting and his body is now different. I'm standing there looking up and I'm just like, oh, okay. We only, I'm there for like 10 minutes. And then I'm like, wow, just to think of the sacrifice. And the Pope asked him to do it. But the reality is you don't tell the Pope no. So he had to do it. He had to do it. It's almost to 2024 where we have to be so careful, even as spiritual leaders or pastors or ministers or whatever, be so careful to not get a God complex. Because the Pope, you don't say no to the Pope. Not God, the Pope. You don't say no to the Pope, Michelangelo. So he went on and he did it. Think about that. This is why in our Bible studies, I'm always saying to us to be sure that we have our own relationship with God and make sure that somebody's not telling you to do something that the Lord hadn't already approved for you to do. What does the Bible say about that? Because people will have you doing things and you end up in a certain state and you say, well, God, wait a minute. No, I didn't tell you to do that. You're following what somebody told you to do. Be careful. Be careful. And as a leader, be careful. Because just like Michelangelo had to do what the Pope said, what are you making people do? Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Okay, let me give you one last thing. It's so much. So I mentioned the Colosseum. I mentioned the Vatican. Oh, I visited, and I have a video that I'm going to post for you. So this is a good place to end, okay? So it'll be like a to be continued. You need to watch the video if you care about this part. Oh my goodness. So I visited in Rome the place, the area where it is believed that Paul and it's believed that Peter were imprisoned. And when I tell you I learned so much, you've just got to watch the video because I'm about to go now, okay? I've taken up quite a bit of your time, but I was able to go into that space where Paul, for example, Paul wrote many epistles. He wrote the letter to the church at Philippi, the book of Philippians. You know that, right? Yes, you know that. Well, he was in prison in Rome when he wrote that. So here I am in Rome. And here I am journeying down, meandering through where it is believed that Paul was in prison. So I go down there. And in Rome on that particular day, it was upwards of like 100 degrees. It was really hot. So up top, it's hot. It's like 100 degrees. But when I went down there, of course, it was cool. We know heat rises, right? It was really cool. So I started to think, how did Paul write? I mean, this is the same Paul. And I'm going to slow down because I'll start preaching it. I think I'm going to preach the book of Philippians in a very different way. How do you say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? Now, before that, he mentioned what he could do. He said what he could do. Sometimes we take that out of context. I'm not going to say much about it now because I'll need to save that for a Bible study. But we say, everybody walks around, I can do all things through Christ. He was talking about the things before that. You know, Philippians 4:13, read 12 and 11. So I was thinking, how could he say I can do all things through Christ? And he was in this little space like this. So if it was cold in 100-degree weather, can you imagine when it was cold in Rome, how cold it was then? It's like, you can do all things in Christ. I know you're talking about the verses before that, Paul. How can you say, because Philippians also says, whatsoever things are, it says whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are. I'm not going to say it in but I'm trying not to do a Bible study right now. I'm trying to give you information about my study. But just reading, one of the first things I did when I got back was reread the book of Philippians. And when I read it, I was like, oh, I have a newfound respect for Paul, a newfound respect for the book of Philippians. I'm like, I never understood this stuff like I understand it now. Now, I'm a person who studies. If you heard my sermons, I try my best to really, really study. So I preached one sermon not long ago entitled An Interview with Epaphroditus, an interview with Epaphroditus. And that is found in the book of Philippians. And if you listen to that sermon, I talk about how Paul is in prison in Rome. He's in chains. Let me tell you something. When I went there, it's like I saw that sermon in a very different way. I hadn't preached at all. I hadn't preached anything. I'm telling you. So if you are a person who desires to learn more, and I got to this part last because I wanted you to know that there's other things to study in Rome. Because, some people say, well, I'm not going because I'm not a preacher or I'm not a educator. No. There are many things to study, okay? If you like food, go to Italy. If you like clothes, go to Italy. There are many reasons to go, okay? So that's why I put this at the end, because I'm going to need you to, if you hadn't already, think about traveling more. Get that passport if you don't already have it. And if you have it, get some more stamps. I'm going to stop right there because I'll talk to you later about some things, okay? But I thank you so much for being here. And I want to just show my little shirt because I'm just so proud. I went to all those places, Rome, Florence, Naples, all but Venice. That's the place where, they have all those those canals. Oh, maybe one day. But I'm so grateful to be back. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your support. Again, thank you for tuning in last week when I pre-recorded. And I just thank God for all of you. And I hope you have a great night. And when you see me, if you have a question, I'll try to answer it, okay? Because this study abroad was not just so much for me, but it was for you. So God bless you. And I hope you have a good evening.